Jason Hartley stood at the panoramic window of his penthouse, looking out at the sparkling lights of New York City at night. At 38, he had achieved everything he had dreamed of in his youth: a huge fortune, a successful business, a luxurious life. But something was missing. The ringing of the phone interrupted his musings. "Jason, where have you been? We've been waiting for you for an hour," came the excited voice of his friend Michael Green. "I'm sorry, Mike. I'm not coming tonight," Jason replied, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "What? But it's your party. Everyone's here to celebrate the deal of the century." Jason sighed. "I know. It's just, I need time to think." "Think about what? You just made $500 million. "That's exactly what I'm thinking about, Mike. About the money. About the people around me. Do you know how many friends I've made in the last month?" Silence hung on the other end of the line. Then Michael said quietly, "Jay, you know I've always been there for you, even before all this." "I know, Mike. You're the exception. But the rest of you, I don't know who I can trust anymore." "So what are you going to do?" Jason turned to the window, his gaze wandering over the cityscape. "I have an idea. It's probably crazy, but I want to do an experiment." "An experiment? What kind?" "I'm going to pretend to go broke. We'll see who stays around when everyone thinks I don't have any more money." "Jason, are you crazy? How are you going to do this?" "I don't know yet, but I have to do it, Mike. I have to find out the truth." Michael was quiet for a moment, then said, "Okay, I'll support you. But be careful. Games like this can end badly." "Thanks, friend. I'll be careful. And Mike, don't tell anyone about this conversation." "Sure. Good luck, Jay." Jason hung up the phone and went back to the window. His reflection looked back at him with challenge. "Time to get started," he whispered to himself. The next morning, Jason set his plan in motion. The first thing he did was call his financial advisor, Sarah Johnson. "Good morning, Mr. Hartley," Sarah answered cheerfully. "What can I do for you?" "Sarah, I need your help with a certain delicate matter," Jason began. "Of course, sir. I'm listening." "I want you to help me give the impression that I'm broke." Silence hung on the other end of the line. "I'm sorry. What?" Jason sighed. "I know it sounds strange, but I have my reasons. I want to conduct a social experiment of sorts." "Mr. Hartley, I'm not sure I understand." "Look, Sarah, I'm not asking you to do anything illegal. I just want you to help me create a believable story about financial difficulties. Maybe failed investments, tax problems, something to explain the sudden loss of most of my fortune." Sarah was quiet for a moment, then said, "All right, Mr. Hartley, if you're sure, I'll prepare some scripts and documents, but let me tell you, it's very risky. Rumors like this could do real damage to your business and reputation." "I understand the risks, Sarah, but this is important to me, and please keep it in the strictest confidence." "Of course, sir. I'll contact you when it's ready." After talking to Sarah, Jason tackled the next phase of his plan. He began looking for a new maid. His current maid had been working for him for years and knew too much about his financial situation. He needed someone new who didn't know his true condition. Jason opened his laptop and began looking through the candidates' resumes. After an hour, he came across a questionnaire that caught his eye. "Emily Thompson, 27 years old," he muttered as he read the information. "Experience in several homes. Good references. Needs a job to help a sick mother." He hesitated. This could be interesting. He dialed the phone number listed on his resume. After a few beeps, a woman's voice was heard. "Hello? Hello, is this Emily Thompson?" "Yes, this is me. Who am I speaking to?" "My name is Jason Hartley. I'm calling about your resume for the maid position." "Oh, yes, of course. I'm very interested in the job." "Great. I'd like to invite you in for an interview. Are you available tomorrow morning?" "Yes, of course. What time is convenient for you?" Let's say 10 a.m. I'll text you the address. Okay, Mr. Hartley. Thank you so much for calling. See you tomorrow. Jason hung up the phone and leaned back in his chair. Well, that's a start, he said to himself. The next morning, Jason paced nervously around his penthouse, waiting for Emily to arrive. He had already removed most of the expensive items and paintings to give the impression of financial hardship. At exactly 10 o'clock, the intercom buzzer rang. Yes? Jason answered. Hello, this is Emily Thompson. I'm here for my interview. Come on up, 20th floor. A few minutes later, there was a knock on the door. Jason took a deep breath and opened it. Standing in front of him was a young woman of average height with curly red hair and a scattering of freckles on her nose. She smiled nervously. Hello, Mr. Hartley. I'm Emily Thompson. Hello, Emily. Please come in. Jason led her into the living room where they sat across from each other. So, Emily, tell me about yourself and your work experience, Jason began. Emily straightened up and began to speak. I am 27 years old and have been working as a maid for 5 years now. In that time, I have worked in several houses, from small apartments to large mansions. I'm able to do all kinds of housework, from cleaning and laundry to cooking simple meals. I'm punctual, responsible, and able to work independently. Jason nodded. Sounds good. Why did you leave your previous job? Emily tensed a little. Well, to be honest, the landlord was starting to take an inappropriate interest in me. I decided it was better to leave than to cause trouble. I understand, Jason said. It was the right decision. I won't have that kind of problem, I promise. Emily visibly relaxed. Thank you, Mr. Hartley. I appreciate it. Now tell me why you want this job. Emily thought for a moment, then replied, My mother is seriously ill. She needs constant care and expensive medication. I'm working to make sure she has everything she needs. Jason looked at her carefully. That must not be easy. Yes, it can be hard, but she's my mom and I'll do everything in my power to help her. Jason nodded. I respect that kind of devotion to family. Look, Emily, I have to be honest with you. My financial situation isn't as stable as it used to be. I've had some problems with my business and I'm having to cut back. The salary won't be as high as you may have expected. Emily was a little surprised, but quickly pulled herself together. I understand, Mr. Hartley. Frankly, any job is important to me right now. If you're willing to give me a chance, I promise to work hard and live up to your trust. Jason smiled. Okay, Emily. I think we can give it a try. When can you start work? As soon as tomorrow if I have to. Great. Then let's start next week. I'll prepare all the necessary paperwork. They shook hands and Emily left. Jason closed the door behind her and leaned his back against it. Well, he thought, the experiment has begun. Emily's first day of work began early Monday morning. She arrived exactly at the appointed time, dressed in simple but neat clothes. Good morning, Mr. Hartley, she said hello as she entered the apartment. Good morning, Emily, Jason replied, coming out of the kitchen with a cup of coffee in his hand. Come on in and I'll show you around. He led Emily around the apartment, showing her where everything was and explaining his preferences. This is the kitchen right here. I usually make my own breakfast, but I'd appreciate it if you'd keep this place tidy. Emily looked around the kitchen carefully. Of course, Mr. Hartley. You have a very nice kitchen. Jason wrinkled his nose slightly. Yes, it was expensive, but these aren't the best of times. Emily looked at him sympathetically. Don't worry, sir. I'll do my best to make sure your home always looks its best, no matter what the circumstances. They continued their rounds of the apartment. Jason showed her the living room, bedrooms, bathrooms, and the study. The study, please don't go in there unnecessarily. My work papers are in there and I prefer them to remain in the order I leave them. Of course, Mr. Hartley. I will respect your privacy, Emily replied. Finishing their rounds, they returned to the living room. Do you have any questions, Emily? Jason asked. Emily thought for a moment. Yes, Mr. Hartley. You mentioned that you make your own breakfast. What about lunch and dinner? Jason rubbed his chin. To be honest, I usually eat lunch in town. And dinner, well, lately I've been ordering takeout a lot or just snacking on something simple. I see, Emily nodded. If you'd like, I could cook dinner for you. It's no problem for me and it might save you some expense. Jason looked at her in surprise. You would do that? That would be very nice of you. Emily smiled. Sure, I love to cook and it's part of my job to see to your comfort. Thank you, Emily. I appreciate your initiative, Jason said sincerely. That was the end of their induction, and Emily got to work. Jason retired to his office, leaving her to clean up the apartment. As the days passed, Emily quickly settled into her new role. She was efficient and attentive to detail, always doing her job with a smile. Jason couldn't help but notice how his apartment was transformed under her care. One evening, about a week after Emily started work, Jason came home later than usual. He was exhausted from a long day full of meetings and negotiations. As he entered the apartment, he smelled the aroma of home-cooked food. Mr. Hartley, Emily called out from the kitchen. I made dinner. I hope you don't mind. Jason made his way into the kitchen and saw the table set. There was an appetizing-looking lasagna on a plate and a bowl of salad next to it. Emily, this looks amazing, he said, feeling his stomach start to rumble. Emily smiled. I'm glad you like it. I've noticed you've been working a lot lately and skipping dinner a lot. Thought you could use a good home-cooked meal. Jason sat down at the table and tried the lasagna. It was delicious. Gosh, Emily, this is incredibly delicious, he said with his mouth full, forgetting his manners. Emily laughed. Thank you, Mr. Hartley. It's my grandmother's old recipe. While Jason ate, Emily began cleaning the kitchen. He watched her, reflecting on how quickly she had become an integral part of his daily life. Emily, he called out when he finished eating, would you please sit down? I'd like to talk to you. Emily wiped her hands and sat down across from him, looking a little concerned. Is something wrong, Mr. Hartley? No, nothing's wrong, Jason hastened to reassure her. I just wanted to say that I really appreciate your work. You're doing a lot more than I expected. Emily smiled in relief. Thank you, Mr. Hartley. I'm just trying to do my job the best I can. Jason nodded. And you're doing a great job at it. But I can't help but notice that you often stay out late. Doesn't that bother you? Emily thought for a moment. To be honest, Mr. Hartley, I like working here. You're a good employer and I feel like I'm doing something useful. Plus, she stammered. Besides, Jason prompted her. Emily sighed. Besides, there's no one waiting for me at home. My mom's in the hospital right now and the apartment feels so empty. This is where I feel needed. Jason felt his heart squeeze with sympathy. I'm sorry to hear about your mom, Emily. How is she feeling? The doctors say there's improvement, but the healing process will be a long one, Emily replied. And Jason noticed tears in her eyes. Without hesitation, he reached out and covered her palm with his. If you need anything, let me know. I know I'm not in the best financial position right now, but I'll try to help in any way I can. Emily looked at him gratefully. Thank you, Mr. Hartley. You're very kind. At that moment, Jason felt a prick of conscience. He had lied to this sincere, hard-working woman about his financial situation, but he quickly pushed the thought away. It's all for the experiment, he reminded himself. They talked a little more about work and daily affairs, after which Emily got ready to leave. Good night, Mr. Hartley, she said as she headed for the door. Good night, Emily, and thanks again for dinner. After she left, Jason sat in the kitchen for a long time, thinking about his experiment and how it had suddenly begun to affect his life. It had been a month since Emily had started working for Jason. In that time, she had become an integral part of his daily life. Every morning he woke up to the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Every evening he returned to a perfectly clean apartment and often found dinner prepared in the kitchen. One morning Jason was sitting in his office reviewing papers when he heard the doorbell ring. It was unusual, as Emily was already in the apartment and was cleaning the living room. "I'll get it, Mr. Hartley," Emily shouted. Jason heard the front door open and then an unfamiliar male voice called out, "Hello, I'm looking for Mr. Hartley. I'm with the IRS." Jason felt his heart skip a beat. He had completely forgotten about the meeting with the tax collector that Sarah had arranged as part of their plan to create the appearance of financial problems. "Mr. Hartley is busy right now," he heard Emily's voice. "Perhaps you'd like to leave a message or set up another time to meet." "No, I need to see him now. It's urgent," the inspector insisted. Jason took a deep breath and walked out of the office. "It's all right, Emily. I'll talk to this gentleman." Emily gave him a concerned look, but stepped aside, letting the inspector pass. "Mr. Hartley," the inspector began, "we have some questions regarding your recent tax returns. There appear to be some serious discrepancies." Jason interrupted him with a quick glance at Emily. "Let's discuss this in my office." As they entered the office and closed the door, the inspector, who was actually an actor hired by Sarah, began to rant about the alleged violations and possible fines. Jason responded to him by feigning confusion and alarm. Half an hour later, the inspector left, leaving Jason looking exhausted and worried. When he left the office, Emily immediately walked over to him. "Mr. Hartley, is everything all right? I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but it sounded serious." Jason rubbed his face with his hands. "Yes, Emily, it's serious. I'm in trouble with the IRS. It looks like I'm going to have to pay a huge fine." Emily looked genuinely concerned. "Oh no, I'm so sorry to hear that. Is there anything I can do to help?" Jason felt a prick of guilt. This woman, who already had a lot of problems, was genuinely worried about him. "No, Emily, thank you. I can handle it." "Okay, but if you need anything, just let me know." Over the next few days, Jason continued to play the role of a man facing serious financial difficulties. He canceled subscriptions to several expensive magazines, started eating at home more often instead of restaurants, and even sold his expensive sports car, really just stashed it in a friend's garage. Emily seemed to notice these changes. She started cooking more home-cooked meals, often leaving enough for lunch the next day. One day, Jason caught her counting the cleaning supplies. "Emily, what are you doing?" he asked. She looked a little embarrassed. "Oh, I was just thinking that we could save money if we use these products more efficiently. I found some tips online on how to make homemade cleaning products. They're just as effective, but much cheaper." Jason was touched by her concern. "Emily, you don't need to do that. It's not your concern." "But I want to help, Mr. Hartley. You've been so kind to me, and I can see you're having a hard time right now." Jason felt his throat constrict with emotion. "Thank you, Emily. I really appreciate it." That evening, sitting in his office, Jason thought about his experiment for a long time. He was beginning to realize that the poverty game was not only affecting him, but also those around him, especially on Emily. He remembered her talking about her sick mother, about her financial difficulties. And now she was trying to save money on cleaning supplies to help him. Guilt overwhelmed him. "What am I doing?" he muttered to himself under his breath. "This isn't an experiment anymore. This is just cruel." Jason stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the city at night. He realized that his actions could have real consequences for the people around him. But at the same time, he couldn't deny that through this experiment, he had gotten to know Emily much better than he would have under normal circumstances. He had seen her true character, her kindness and selflessness. Jason sighed and rubbed his eyes. He knew he would have to end this experiment sooner or later, but he wasn't sure how to do it without hurting the relationship he had with Emily. Another 2 weeks passed. Jason continued his experiment, but each day it became harder and harder for him to maintain the lie, especially when he saw Emily trying to help him with his supposedly difficult financial situation. One evening, Jason came home later than usual. He was exhausted from a long day of negotiations. Actually, he had spent the day thinking about how to finish his experiment and dreamed only of a hot shower and a soft bed. When he entered the apartment, he was greeted by an unaccustomed silence. Usually at this time, Emily was still here, finishing up her chores or cooking dinner. "Emily?" he called out, but there was no response. Jason made his way into the kitchen and saw a note on the table. "Mr. Hartley, please excuse my sudden departure. I got a call from the hospital. My mom is worse. I had to go and see her at once. Don't worry about dinner. I've left some food in the fridge for you. Just heat it up. Emily." Jason felt his heart squeeze with worry for Emily and her mom. He pulled out his phone and dialed her number, but Emily's phone was off. Not knowing what else to do, Jason heated up the food Emily had left and sat down to eat dinner alone. The apartment seemed unusually empty and quiet without Emily's presence. The next morning, Jason awoke to the ringing of the phone. It was Emily. "Mr. Hartley, I'm sorry to bother you so early." Her voice sounded tired and strained. "Emily, don't apologize. How's your mom?" Emily took a deep breath. She needs emergency surgery. The doctors say that without her, she doesn't stand much of a chance." "Oh my God, Emily, I'm so sorry," Jason said sincerely. "The problem is that the surgery is very expensive. I have some savings, but it's not enough. I don't know what to do." Jason felt his heart breaking. He could easily pay for this surgery, but that would mean exposing his deception. "How much money do you need, Emily?" he asked, already knowing what he was about to do. $50,000, Emily replied quietly. "I know that's a huge sum. I just wanted to warn you that I may have to take a few days off to find an extra job or a loan." "Emily, listen to me," Jason interrupted her. "I'm going to help you." "What?" "But Mr. Hartley, you're in financial trouble yourself. I can't accept—" "Emily, please listen to me. I have something to tell you, and I'm asking you to listen to me all the way through before you say anything." There was silence in the receiver. Then Emily said quietly, "Okay, I'm listening." Jason took a deep breath and began to narrate. He told her about his experiment, about why he had decided to pretend to be broke, about his doubts and guilt. He talked for a long time, uninterrupted, afraid that if he stopped, he wouldn't be able to finish. When he finally stopped talking, there was silence in the receiver for a long time. "Emily?" he called out cautiously. "Yeah, I don't know what to say, Mr. Hartley." Her voice sounded stunned. "Do you mean to say that all this time, all your financial problems weren't real?" "Yes, Emily, I am. And I can't tell you how much I regret it. I know what I did was selfish and cruel. I didn't think about how it might affect other people. On you." Emily was silent for so long that Jason began to fear she had hung up on him. "I don't know if you'll ever be able to forgive me, Emily," he continued, "but I want to make things right. I'll pay for your mom's surgery. Not only that, I'll cover all of her medical and rehabilitation expenses." "Mr. Hartley, I don't know what to say," Emily's voice shook. "I'm grateful for your offer to help my mom, but I feel cheated. All this time, I've been worried about you, trying to help, saving money for everything to make your situation easier. And all of that was a game." Jason felt his eyes fill with tears. "Emily, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but please let me help your mom. It's the least I can do after everything you've done for me." There was silence again in the receiver. Finally, Emily said quietly, "All right, Mr. Hartley, I accept your help, for my mom's sake, but I need time to think about all of this. I'm not sure I can continue working for you." Jason's heart clenched, but he knew he had no right to ask for more. I understand, Emily. Thank you for listening to me. I'll contact the hospital right away and arrange payment for the surgery. Please keep me updated on your mom's condition. I will, Mr. Hartley. I thank you for your honesty, even if it is belated. After this conversation, Emily hung up the phone and Jason remained seated, staring into the space in front of him. He felt relieved that he had finally told the truth, but at the same time he was overwhelmed with guilt and fear that he might have lost Emily's trust forever. The next few days passed like a blur for Jason. He kept his promise and paid for Emily's mother's surgery and arranged to cover all related medical expenses. Emily briefly informed him that the surgery had been a success, but never contacted him again. Jason couldn't find a place to be. He tried to immerse himself in his work, but his thoughts kept returning to Emily and how he'd messed up. The apartment that had seemed cozy before, thanks to Emily's care, now looked empty and lifeless. On the third day after talking to Emily, Jason decided he couldn't sit idle any longer. He called his friend Michael and asked for a meeting. They met at a small cafe near Jason's office. Michael immediately noticed that his friend looked exhausted. "Jay, you look terrible. What's wrong?" Michael asked as soon as they sat down at the table. Jason sighed and began to tell Michael the whole story, about his experiment, about Emily, about how things had gotten out of control. Michael listened intently without interrupting. When Jason finished, he shook his head. "Jay, you're in big trouble," he said. "I know," Jason replied, lowering his head. "I messed up big time. Emily she was amazing. She cared about me even when she thought I had nothing. And I betrayed her trust." Michael looked at his friend carefully. "Jay, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "You fell in love with her, didn't you?" Jason looked up, surprised by the question. But then, after thinking about it, he realized Michael was right. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I guess I did. But it doesn't matter now. I've ruined everything." Michael shook his head. "Not necessarily. Look, what you did was stupid and selfish, but you've admitted your mistake and you're trying to fix it. That's something." "But how can I fix it, Mike? Emily will probably never want to see me again." "Give her time, Jay. She's worried about her mom right now and trying to make sense of everything that's happened. But when things calm down, try talking to her again. Be honest. Tell her how you feel." Jason nodded but looked unsure. "What if she doesn't want to listen?" "Then at least you'll know you did your best," Michael replied. "But don't give up right away. If Emily really is as you describe her, maybe she'll find the strength to forgive you." After talking to Michael, Jason felt a little better. He had hope, albeit faint hope. Another week passed. Jason tried to keep himself busy with work, but thoughts of Emily never left him. He wanted to call her, but he was afraid of being intrusive. Instead, he sent several messages, inquiring about her mother's health and offering to help in any way he could. Emily responded politely but briefly. Finally, at the end of the week, Jason's phone rang. It was Emily. "Mr. Hartley," she began, and Jason felt his heart beat faster. I'd like to talk to you. In person. Would you mind coming to the hospital?" "Of course, Emily," Jason replied, trying to hide the excitement in his voice. "I'll be there in an hour." When he arrived at the hospital, Emily was waiting for him in the cafeteria. She looked tired, but calm. "Hello, Mr. Hartley," she said as he approached. "Hello, Emily," Jason replied. "How's your mom?" "She's much better," Emily smiled weakly. "The doctors say the surgery was a success and now it's just a matter of time and rehabilitation." "I'm so glad to hear that," Jason said sincerely. They were silent for a while, then Emily took a deep breath and looked directly at Jason. "Mr. Hartley, I've been thinking a lot about what happened," she began. "About your experiment, about how you helped my mom. I've had time to think it over and I want to tell you something." Jason tensed, preparing for the worst. "I'm listening, Emily." "What you did was wrong," she said firmly. "You tricked me, made me worry and worry about you when you didn't really need to. It was Cruel. Jason lowered his head. I know it was, Emily, and I can't tell you how much I regret it. But, Emily continued, and Jason looked up at her, I also understand why you did it. You wanted to find out who would stay with you, not because of your money, but because of yourself. I think I can understand that. Jason felt hope flicker in his chest. Really? Emily nodded. Yes. You know, working for rich people, I've often seen how money changes relationships, how people become fake and self-serving, and I can understand your desire to find someone sincere. Emily, Jason began, but she held up a hand, stopping him. Let me finish, please. I've been thinking about this for a long time, and this is what I've come to. What you did was wrong. But the way you acted afterward, admitting to the deception, helping my mom without asking for anything in return, it shows that you're a good man who made a mistake. Jason felt his eyes fill with tears. Emily, I don't know what to say. I'm so grateful for your understanding. I don't deserve this. Emily smiled weakly. Maybe you do, but I believe in second chances, and I think I'd like to give you that chance. Really? Jason couldn't believe his ears. Are you going back to work? Emily shook her head. No, Mr. Hartley, I can't go back to work for you. Not after everything that's happened, but I think we could start over. As friends. Jason felt both disappointment and relief at the same time. I understand, and I'd be really happy about that, Emily. I really would. Good. Emily held out her hand. Then let's start over. Hi, I'm Emily Thompson. Jason smiled and shook her hand. It's nice to meet you, Emily. I'm Jason Hartley. After that conversation, something changed between them. They started seeing each other from time to time, first at the hospital where Jason came to visit Emily's mom, and then outside. Gradually, their relationship grew warmer. They talked about everything: Jason's work, Emily's future plans, books, movies, and life in general. Jason found it incredibly easy to relate to Emily. She was intelligent, insightful, and had a great sense of humor. One day, about 3 months after their conversation at the hospital, they were sitting in a small park not far from Emily's house. It was a warm spring day, and the trees were blooming all around them. You know, Emily said, looking at the children playing nearby, I never thought that after everything that's happened, we'd be sitting here talking like this. Jason nodded. I did too. I'm grateful every day for this second chance, Emily. She turned to him and smiled. I'm glad I gave you this chance, Jason. You've become an important part of my life. Jason felt his heart beat faster. You've become an important part of my life too, Emily, and I'd like to tell you something. Emily looked at him curiously. What is it? Jason took a deep breath. I've fallen in love with you, Emily. Not with the maid who worked for me, but with the woman I've come to know over these months. A smart, kind, strong woman who was able to forgive me and give me a second chance. Emily was silent, and Jason felt his heart drop. I understand if you don't feel the same way, he added quickly. I just wanted you to know. Emily shook her head slowly. Jason, I've fallen in love with you too. But I was afraid to admit it. Afraid it was too hard after everything that's happened. Jason felt joy fill him. Really? You really feel the same way? Emily nodded, smiling through the tears that were beginning to gather in the corners of her eyes. Yes, I really do. But Jason, we need to be careful. We have a complicated past, and I don't want us to rush in and mess it up. I understand, Jason said, taking her hands in his. We can move as slowly as you want. I'm just happy we have this chance. They sat like that for a while, holding hands and smiling at each other. Then Emily suddenly laughed. What's wrong? Jason asked. I was just thinking, who would have imagined it would turn out like this when you hired me as your maid? Jason laughed as well. Yeah, well, life is full of surprises, but you know what? I wouldn't change a single moment because It all led us here. The next few months were a time of discovery and growth for Jason and Emily. They started dating, but as they promised each other, they moved slowly, savoring every moment together. Jason found that Emily brought something to his life that he had always lacked: simplicity and sincerity. She wasn't impressed by his wealth or status. Instead, she appreciated him for who he truly was. Emily, for her part, saw Jason in a new light. She recognized him as a man who could make mistakes, but had the courage to admit them and correct them. She saw his generosity and kindness that went far beyond financial assistance. One evening, they were sitting on the balcony of Jason's apartment watching the sunset. Emily turned to him with a serious expression on her face. "Jason, there's something I want to tell you," she began. "What is it?" he asked, feeling slightly uneasy. "I got a job offer," Emily said, "at a charity organization that helps low-income families. It's something I've always wanted to do." "Emily, that's wonderful!" Jason exclaimed. "I'm so happy for you." Emily smiled, but then her face turned serious again. "But there's one problem. The job is in another city. I'll have to move." Jason felt his heart drop. "Oh, I understand." "I don't know what to do, Jason," Emily continued. "This job is the opportunity I've always dreamed of, but I don't want to lose you." Jason was silent for a while, contemplating the situation. Then he turned to Emily and took her hands in his. "Emily, listen to me. You have to accept this offer." "But what about us?" she asked, and tears glistened in her eyes. "We'll manage," Jason said confidently. "I can work from anywhere. If you don't mind, I could move in with you." Emily looked at him in surprise. "You'd do that for me?" "I would do anything for you, Emily," Jason replied sincerely. "You gave me a second chance when I didn't deserve it. You showed me what it means to truly love and be loved. If this move makes you happy, I'll be there supporting you." Emily threw herself into his arms, unable to hold back tears of joy. "I love you, Jason," she whispered. "I love you too, Emily," he replied, hugging her tightly. A few weeks later, Jason and Emily moved to a new town. It was the beginning of a new phase in their lives, a phase full of hope and opportunity. Jason continued to run his business remotely, but he also began spending more time on charity work. Inspired by Emily's work, he created a foundation that helped low-income families receive education and medical care. Emily thrived in her new job. Her passion for helping others and her organizational skills quickly made her a key member of the organization. A year after their move, on a quiet Sunday evening, Jason took Emily out to dinner at a restaurant for their first meal together in this new city. After dinner, they went for a walk in a nearby park. Stopping at a fountain, Jason turned to Emily. "Emily," he began, his voice shaking with excitement, "this year has been the happiest year of my life. You've taught me that true wealth is not money in a bank account, but love and kindness in the heart." He dropped to one knee and pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Opening it, he showed Emily a simple but elegant diamond ring. "Emily Thompson, will you marry me?" Emily froze for a moment, then smiled broadly, tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. "Yes, Jason, yes, I will marry you." Jason slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to hug and kiss his now bride. Passers-by gathered around them, applauding and congratulating the happy couple. That night, lying in bed in their cozy apartment, Jason and Emily talked about the future. "You know," Jason said, gently stroking Emily's hand, "I never thought a silly experiment would lead me to such happiness." Emily smiled, intertwining her fingers with his. "Life is full of surprises, isn't it? Who would have thought that working as a maid would lead me to the love of my life?" "We've come a long way," Jason said thoughtfully. "And you know what? I'm grateful for every moment, even the hard times. They've made us stronger." "Me too," Emily agreed. "They've taught us to appreciate what's really important." Jason and Emily's wedding was modest but full of love. They invited only their closest friends and family, including Emily's mom, who had fully recovered by then. After their honeymoon, the couple returned to their work with renewed enthusiasm. Jason continued to grow his charitable foundation, working closely with Emily's organization. One day, a few months after the wedding, Emily came home with shining eyes. "Jason, I have an idea," she said, sitting down next to her husband on the couch. "I'm all ears," Jason smiled. "I think we could do something more," Emily began. "What if we combined your business experience and my knowledge of social work? We could create a program that doesn't just help people but teaches them how to help themselves." Jason leaned forward interestedly. "Go on." "We could set up financial literacy classes, help people start small businesses, give microloans, not just give fish, but teach how to fish, you know?" Jason's eyes lit up. "Emily, that's a brilliant idea. We could create a whole network of programs like this all over the country." They spent the entire night discussing the details of their new project. A few months later, their idea became a reality in the form of the New Horizons Foundation. The program quickly gained popularity. The success stories of the people the foundation helped inspired others. Jason and Emily often spoke at conferences, sharing their experiences and inspiring other entrepreneurs to engage in socially responsible business. 3 years later, when New Horizons was already operating in dozens of cities across the country, Emily gave Jason a special surprise. She welcomed him home one evening with a mysterious smile. "I have news for you," she said, holding out a small box to Jason. Jason opened it and saw little pennies inside. "Emily, you—" He couldn't finish the phrase with excitement. Emily nodded, her eyes glowing with happiness. "Yes, we're going to be parents soon." Jason hugged his wife, feeling his heart overflow with love and gratitude. His experiment had long since ended, but the results had exceeded all expectations. He hadn't just found someone who loved him for more than money. He'd found a partner, a friend, and an associate in the endeavor that had become their life's work.